His hands found my waist with a confidence that caught me off guard. Not harsh, just sure of himself. Before I could even catch my breath, his lips were right by my ear. I jumped, but not away from him, toward him. My spine curved, not from hurt, but from pure surprise. The storage room felt ice cold around us. He felt like fire. His body pressed against mine completely. I had walked in here just to count supplies. I never saw him coming. Or maybe deep down I did. It was Thursday afternoon. The big freezer door always makes two clicking sounds when it closes. I only heard one click. His hand moved down slowly, like he had forever to do this. I should have said his name out loud. I should have stepped back. But when I tried to move, he simply pulled me even closer. I didn't fight it, didn't even breathe a word of protest. My head fell back against the cold metal shelf, jars of pickled vegetables shaking softly behind me. Someone outside was cutting green onions. That steady chopping sound felt like a timer counting down. I always promised myself I'd never become that kind of woman, the type who lets things happen just because stopping them feels too hard. But when he leaned close and whispered, "You're trembling," I realized it wasn't from the cold. I took one small step backward. My shoulder bumped into boxes of soup base stacked high. He didn't try to grab me back, didn't say sorry, just stared at me like I'd proven something he already suspected, that I wanted this, that I didn't hate what just happened. He walked out of the room. The door clicked once, then twice. I stayed frozen in place, unable to move. My name is Alina. I'm 38 years old. I've worked at this restaurant for 7 long years. It belongs to Carol, my closest friend, the kind of person who still remembers exactly how you like your coffee even after years apart. Dean is her stepson. She once mentioned hopping he'd outgrow his wild side. I think I just became part of that wildness. Here's what I need you to understand: he wasn't the first man to look at me with desire. But he was the first one I couldn't look away from. He didn't handle me like I might break. He touched me like he already knew I'd stop him if I truly wanted to. So why didn't I stop him? That question has been spinning in my mind ever since. Why didn't I? Was it loneliness? Or was it because I finally felt alive after months of feeling invisible? What would you do if the first time someone made you feel wanted in years was exactly when you shouldn't feel that way? That's what this story really is. Not just about cheating. It's about remembering how to feel something after forgetting you could, even when that feeling might destroy everything you promised to protect. If you've ever stood so close to a terrible mistake that you could feel it breathing on your face, hit that like button and subscribe. This isn't about right and wrong. It's about what happens when staying quiet becomes louder than any regret. Saturday nights were always crazy busy at the restaurant. The kind of noise that made your ears ring when you finally stepped outside, but back in the narrow hallway behind the kitchen, everything was dead silent. The thick walls kept the cold air trapped inside. Or maybe they just kept secrets better than people ever could. I stood in that hallway longer than I needed to, pretending to read the supply list. My pen hung over the same line for more than a minute. Garlic oil, 1 liter, 2 boxes. I hadn't written anything down. My hand just trembled slightly, which annoyed me more than anything else. Dean walked past me, standing way too close again. He didn't say a word. He never had to, that was Dean's way. He never pushed too hard, never flirted obviously. He'd just stand closer than normal, wait longer before walking away, let his eyes linger just a beat too long. But what happened in the freezer, that was different. That crossed every line, and I allowed it. At home, I kept quiet around Frank, my husband. He asked if I wanted to watch that silly detective show we always put on during weekends. I nodded, then went to take an endless shower. The water was hot enough to burn. I didn't scrub myself harder than usual, but I stood there waiting for the guilt to hit my body like a punch. It never came, not yet. The only thing I could feel was the memory of where Dean's hand had rested, low, steady, just above my hip. That's what stayed with me. Frank kissed the back of my head before we went to sleep. I jerked away slightly. He didn't notice. At work, Carol mentioned that Dean was thinking about leaving the restaurant, moving to Denver. Good for him, I said way too quickly. She tilted her head curiously. Why do you sound relieved about that? I stayed quiet. The next time I found myself in that back hallway, I made sure to keep the storage door wide open. Dean didn't come near me, didn't speak, but when I went to the break room for coffee, there was a folded note on the table. I'm not sorry, but I'll stop if you ask me to. No signature, just those words. Hidden neatly under a coffee cup lid. I stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into my pocket. I didn't throw it away. I didn't write back either. Carol kept talking about renovating the restaurant. She wanted to knock down the back wall near the staff bathroom. All I could think was, please don't do that. That hallway is the only place where I can breathe normally. That evening, Frank made pasta for dinner. His way of trying to reconnect with me, I could tell. He poured wine for both of us. He lit a candle, said he missed spending time with me. I smiled and nodded, told him I missed him too. The words felt like they came from someone else's mouth. That's when I understood the worst part. It wasn't what happened with Dean in the freezer. It was that I felt nothing with Frank anymore. Not even guilt about that. Later, while folding towels in our bedroom, I found the note again. I read it once more. Not sorry would stop, only if I asked. So why hadn't I asked him to? Maybe because I liked knowing someone was waiting for my answer, even if I never planned to give one. Dean walked past me again on Monday. He didn't touch me, but the way he looked at me, like he still could made me drop my clipboard. We both bent down to pick it up at the same time. My hand touched his briefly. Nothing dramatic happened, but everything changed. Tuesday was inventory day, the kind of day I usually hated. Too many lists to check, too many trips to the freezer, too much standing on sore feet in a space that always smelled like raw onions and cleaning supplies. But that Tuesday felt different because I knew he'd be there, and I knew we'd be alone together again. Dean got assigned to count dry goods with me. Carol handed him the clipboard and said, "You two always finish the fastest. I'm keeping my best team together." Then she winked, completely unaware of what she'd just said. We walked silently toward the narrow storage area, past the stacked syrup boxes and those old wire shelves that always leaned to one side. The air conditioning hummed quietly above us, and I felt goosebumps on my arms that had nothing to do with temperature. Dean handed me a pen without looking directly at me. I took it carefully. Our fingers didn't touch. That made everything worse somehow. He read numbers aloud and I wrote them down. Brown rice, 25 pounds, 2 bags, got it. Chickpeas, 10 per case, 3 on the bottom shelf. Check. I didn't dare turn toward him. The space was cramped. If I moved even a little, my shoulder would brush against his, and I knew exactly what would happen if it did because I could already feel the air changing, the way it does right before a storm hits. Thick, waiting, electric. Then I made a mistake. I dropped the pen on purpose. Maybe, I'm still not sure. It rolled near his boot. I crouched down to get it, just as he did the same thing. Our shoulders bumped and then we both froze. I looked up. He looked down. For that moment, the silence between us was deafening. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could see his pulse jumping in his neck. "I can't stop thinking about it," he said quietly. He didn't explain what it meant. He didn't need to. I opened my mouth to respond. No words came out. Then someone yelled from the front of the restaurant, Tony, the dishwasher. Inventory sheets. Carol wants them before break. Dean blinked, stepped back, and stood up. I stayed crouched down longer than necessary. When I finally stood, I noticed his cologne had somehow gotten onto the flour bag nearby. It wasn't strong, just a mix of wood and sweat and laundry soap, but it was enough. It followed me through the rest of my shift. I could smell it on my shirt when I got in my car. At home, Frank asked why I seemed so distracted. Inventory day, I told him. He believed me. He kissed my cheek while I put away groceries. I flinched again. He didn't notice again. The next night, I volunteered to stay late and help close the restaurant. Dean didn't say anything, but I could feel his awareness. We were both doing the same math in our heads. How long until everyone else left? Who was still on the clock? Which door had the broken lock? When would it be just us? I pretended to reorganize the spice containers. Dean moved closer, not quite touching me. "Just there, do you want me to stop?" he asked. I stared at the plastic container of cinnamon and whispered, "I don't know." He said, "I do." And he reached around me to grab the container, his body brushing against my back. I shivered. We didn't kiss. We didn't do anything more. But we stood there pressed too close for too long, both of us breathing unevenly. His hand rested on the shelf above mine. If someone had walked in, there would have been no explanation, and I didn't move away. Later, I stood in the parking lot longer than I needed to, pretending to search for my car keys. He waited in his car with the engine running. He didn't wave goodbye. I drove home with both windows down, hoping the cold night air would erase everything, but I could still feel exactly where he'd stood behind me, and I knew I wouldn't ask him to stop. The next time, it went beyond just tension. It was Friday night. The dinner rush was over. The lights were dimmed. It had rained hard earlier, leaving everything slippery: sidewalks, windows, even the back hallway tiles that never dried properly under that broken air vent. Dean and I were both on closing shift again. Not planned. Not exactly. Everyone else left in pairs. April got her ride. Manny caught his bus. Carol tossed her apron in the laundry basket and said, "Lock up for me, okay?" She was already halfway to her car. By the time the door clicked shut behind her, I was leaning over the cash register counting tip money. I could feel Dean watching me. I didn't look up. The room was quiet except for the humming soda machine and a leaky faucet that had been dripping all week. 1, 2, 3 seconds passed slowly. Then I felt him behind me. His hand brushed the side of my hip. I didn't jump away. "We shouldn't do this," I whispered. His breath hit the side of my neck. "You keep saying that." "I mean it this time." He didn't answer. Just let his hand move further, slow and confident. My knees locked up. I turned around, and for a moment we didn't speak. Then I kissed him first. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't slow. It was desperate, fast, silent. We didn't even make it out of the hallway. We ended up pressed against the walk-in freezer door, cold metal behind my back and warm skin against my chest. His hands were strong, rough from kitchen work, familiar somehow. I felt him everywhere. My shirt pulled up, his breathing shaky, mine even worse. He didn't ask permission. I didn't stop him. When it was over, we didn't talk. We didn't look at each other right away. I fixed my clothes. He turned toward the sink. I wiped my hands with a napkin from the counter and accidentally knocked over the salt shaker. It hit the floor with a loud clatter. That sound stayed stuck in my head all night. We didn't say goodbye. He left first. I watched his taillights blink as he backed up, then disappear into the darkness. I stayed in the empty restaurant, sitting on a stool near the fryer, letting the smell of grease soak into my jacket. The silence felt heavier now, like it was keeping a secret. At home, Frank was asleep on the couch. I watched him for a long time. There was a bruise on his arm, probably from moving boxes at his job. I knew that about him. Still, I asked nothing, said nothing. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'm exhausted." He nodded without really waking up. I took another long shower. The water pressure at our house was always weak, but I stood under it like it could wash away what I'd done. It couldn't. The next morning, Dean didn't text me. He didn't even look at me when I walked into work. We folded napkins at opposite ends of the prep table. The space between us felt louder than the radio playing. I dropped a fork, bent down to pick it up. He didn't move, didn't speak. When I stood up, I finally said it out loud. "This is going to destroy everything." Dean looked at me for just a second and said, "I know." Then he turned back to his work like nothing had happened. But something had happened, and I knew it wouldn't be the last time, because the only thing worse than what we'd done was the thought of never doing it again. I started checking my phone in places I never used to: bathroom breaks, in my car at red lights, while waiting for the microwave to finish. Sometimes I'd open my messages just to scroll through the empty conversation. Nothing new, just that one text bubble from days ago. "You okay?" He hadn't replied. It had been 3 days. Not that I was counting. At work, we went back to pretending mostly. He'd nod when I walked in. I'd ask normal things like "need help with the ice" or "want me to restock the cups." Like everything was exactly how it used to be, but it wasn't the same. He handed me a clean towel during one shift and our fingers brushed accidentally. I pulled away too quickly. He noticed but said nothing. That silence was starting to poison every room we shared. One night after closing, I stayed behind to clean the cutting boards. Dean had already left, or so I thought. I heard the back door squeak open again, too soon for it to be anyone else. He leaned in and said, "You forgot your phone charger." My heart jumped. We stood there again in the same hallway. Same broken vent still making noise. I took the charger from his hand. He didn't let go of it immediately. My fingers wrapped around his accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally. I didn't pull away this time. "I can't stop thinking about it," he whispered. I said nothing, just stared at the cracked floor tiles. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "You don't have to say anything back. I just needed to say that out loud." Then he left. No kiss, no touch, just those words and then his absence. That night, I dreamed about the salt shaker falling again. But this time it didn't stop. It hit the counter, cracked, and kept bouncing over and over like it would never settle. I woke up covered in sweat. Frank reached for me, half asleep. I turned my back to him, mumbling some excuse about having a headache. I didn't know what I was trying to avoid more, his touch or my own shame. The next day, Carol asked me if something was wrong. Not directly, just a tilt of her head and a "you seem different lately." I lied smoothly. "Probably just tired from working too much." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't buy it. That was when everything started falling apart. Little threads coming loose. A missed shift here. An over-explained excuse there. Dean and I both knew it was getting harder to hide something we didn't even fully understand ourselves. Later that week, I found another note in the back storage room. It was tucked under the bag of coffee filters. It said Tuesday 9 p.m., same hallway as last time. His handwriting was sharp, messy, like he'd written it fast and folded it even faster. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't even respond. But I showed up anyway. I wore the same jacket I'd worn the first time and the same shoes that made that soft, sticky sound on the kitchen floor. He was already waiting when I pushed open the back door. We didn't speak. He just reached for me, hesitated for a heartbeat, and I let him touch me again. Because what do you do when every part of your brain wants to run away, but your body refuses to move? Because how do you say no when you already know what yes feels like? His hand found my lower back again. That same pressure, that same hesitation, Except this time he didn't ask if it was okay. He just leaned in, pressed his forehead against mine like it was supposed to mean something important, like we were sharing some silent understanding we'd never speak out loud. I let it happen. I let all of it happen because honestly, I didn't know how to stop anymore. And maybe I didn't want to stop. There was no rush this time, no frantic grabbing or panicked breathing. He kissed me like he was already missing it before it ended, and I kissed him back like it would make the guilt quieter. It didn't help at all. Afterward, I stood against the hallway wall, fully dressed again, staring at the same crooked poster about employee safety that had been peeling off the wall since last fall. He stood across from me, arms crossed, breathing hard but saying nothing. We weren't smiling. We weren't angry. We weren't anything that made any sense. I finally whispered, "What are we even doing here?" He looked up slowly. "I think we already did it." Neither of us laughed. The next day, I called in sick to work. I wasn't lying, just not the kind of sick you can fix with medicine. At home, Frank noticed I hadn't eaten anything. He offered to heat up the leftover soup from lunch, and I nodded without really meaning it. The microwave beeped, and for a split second, I thought about the beeping from the ice machine at work. That sound had been following me into every room lately. I sat on the edge of our bed that night, staring at the dresser. On top of it sat an old photo of me and Frank from our honeymoon. Both of us sunburned, both of us grinning. I hadn't really looked at that picture in months, not the way you're supposed to look when remembering actually matters. And now I didn't know what to do with it. Dean sent one final message. "I'm leaving next month, thought you should know." No request for a response, no follow-up question, just that simple statement. It sat in my phone like a wound that wouldn't heal. I never wrote back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know which version of myself would be doing the writing, the one who stayed or the one who might follow. Some days I still walk past that hallway at work. I don't look inside, but I feel it like something unspoken still lives there waiting. I haven't told anyone what happened. I never will. But sometimes when I'm drying my hands in the restroom, I look in the mirror and wait for something in my reflection to call me out to show my guilt. It never does. It just stares back, quiet, accepting, exhausted. And I wonder, was the worst part what we did together, or that I still don't regret it?